The boutique was humming. Hangers slid across racks, the scent of lavender polish clung to the air, and the late afternoon sun poured through tall glass windows, striking diamonds of light on the marble floor. Claire moved with practiced calm, adjusting a display of silk scarves for the weekend rush. She had always loved this hour. The quiet before the storm of customers, the rhythm of her sanctuary. Her phone buzzed against the counter. She didn't reach for it immediately. Habit taught her patience. But the vibration persisted, pulsing like an anxious heartbeat. When she finally picked it up, her world contracted into a single, glowing screen. "I'm leaving you. Moving to Miami tomorrow with Melissa. Already drained the account. Don't wait up." No greeting. No hesitation. Just words that felt like a fist through glass. For a second, time fractured. The boutique around her blurred into silence. The faint hum of the air conditioner suddenly louder than everything. Her pulse thundered, but her hand stayed steady, fingertips brushing the smooth silk of gruff she had been folding. Mrs. Peterson, a loyal customer, approached the counter with a smile, oblivious to the invisible storm detonating in Claire's chest. "Wrap this one for me, dear. My sister will adore it." Claire's lips shaped a practiced smile. Of course. Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't tremble as she slipped the scarf into tissue, then slid it into the boutique's silver, stamped box. Only her eyes betrayed the fracture, an almost imperceptible tightening at the corners, the kind only a mirror might notice. As Mrs. Peterson left, the doorbell chiming lightly in her wake, Claire looked again at the message. A second one had arrived. "Don't bother calling. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. I'll send for my things." She exhaled slowly, pressing the phone flat against the counter as though steadying it might steady her. 12 years of marriage dismissed in 2 texts, each one colder than the last. But beneath the initial sting, something else flickered. Faint, sharp, deliberate. A steel thread winding through the shock. Because Claire had seen this unraveling long before Mark pressed send. The late nights. The business dinners. The cologne he never wore at home. The gym memberships, the sudden password changes. She hadn't confronted him then. She'd simply observed, she'd adapted. And quietly, methodically, she had prepared. Now, standing in the golden wash of her boutique, she realized the preparation had not been in vain. Her phone buzzed again. "At least you've got your little shop to keep you busy. You'll need it, you're not getting younger." This time, Claire's lips curved into something new. Not a smile, not sorrow. A restrained laugh, low and incredulous. As though the man she had once loved had become a caricature of himself. She slid the phone into her bag, walked to the boutique's glass door, and flipped the sign to closed. The locks clicked with finality. The stage had been set. Mark thought this was his ending. He had no idea it was only her beginning. Claire didn't drive home right away. Instead, she sat in her car across from the boutique. The street lamps flickering to life in the deepening dusk. The city around her pulsed with Friday night energy. Couples laughing, engines revving, neon signs humming awake. Yet inside the quiet of her sedan, the world felt suspended. She unlocked her phone again. Staring at the words that had detonated her life. "Leaving you drained the account, you're not getting younger." They weren't just cruel. They were careless. A man desperate to wound, yet blind to the strength of the woman he thought he was discarding. Her thumb hovered, tempted to respond with venom, with rage. Instead, she pressed the screen off. Silence was sharper than any reply. The quiet gave way to memories. Not sentimental ones, but cold flashes of all the red flags she'd catalogued over the past year. The work trips that never matched his calendar. The laughter of a young receptionist at a Christmas party, her hand lingering too long on his arm. The restaurant receipts slipped between bills like guilty confessions. Claire had not ignored them. She had built her own fortress in secret. A separate account under a different bank. Duplicates of tax filings, business papers, and the deed to her grandmother's house. All carefully filed, all in her name alone. Her boutique, the little shop, he mocked, had been her salvation long before tonight. The phone buzzed again, vibrating like an insect trapped in glass. She ignored it at first, then let her eyes fall to the screen. "Melissa and I leave tomorrow. Don't make this harder on yourself. Be dignified for once. For once." The words lodged like shards in her chest. Dignity. Hadn't she carried it through every late night alone, every lie he'd fed her with a smile? Hadn't she swallowed humiliation in silence, all while building a business he dismissed as a hobby? Claire inhaled slowly, letting the anger rise, not to consume her but to fuel her. She scrolled to a different contact. Her lawyer's name glowed on the screen, one she had added months ago, just in case. Just in case had arrived. "Time," she said when the call connected, her voice even. "Time," came the reply. The conversation was practical. Documents already drafted, contingencies already in place. Claire had only to give the word. Mark, in his arrogance, had set the dominoes falling with his own hand. When the call ended, she drove not to the house, not yet. She needed air. Distance. The city unfurled around her as she wound through streets lit by the rhythm of bars and cafes. At a red light, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face looked unchanged, almost serene. But her eyes carried a gleam she hadn't seen in years. It wasn't grief. It wasn't shock. It was resolve. By the time she reached the old oak-lined driveway of her grandmother's house, her mind was clear. Mark thought he had written her ending. But endings were for the unprepared. Claire had always prepared. And tomorrow, he would discover just how much. Morning arrived wrapped in the false calm of routine. Claire brewed her coffee. Its warmth spiraling through the kitchen like nothing had changed. The familiar hum of the kettle, the scent of toasted bread. It almost tricked her into believing the world hadn't been split in half the night before. Then the phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a single message but a barrage. Booked our tickets. First class Miami. Consider it my parting gift. The house is too big for you alone. Don't worry. I'll let you stay until you find something smaller. We'll talk about the shop later. I want it done fairly. I'll take my half. Claire set her coffee cup down with such force that porcelain kissed granite in a sharp crack. Half, her business. The boutique was her lifeline, her inheritance, her hours of sweat stitched into every seam. He hadn't lifted a finger for it, yet here he was, laying claim to something sacred. The rage that followed was not loud. It was focused, narrow, clean, like glass snapping into perfect shards. She opened her laptop, fingers flying with precision. Emails to her lawyer attaching bank statements, scanned receipts, tax filings, all proof of separation. Another click, and she was on the phone with her credit card company. Yes, she said crisply, her tone all business. I need to report fraudulent charges. 2 airline tickets, a hotel reservation. Booked by my husband without consent. The representative's polite professionalism couldn't mask the undercurrent of satisfaction as the charges were cancelled one by one. Claire almost smiled imagining the scene at the airport. The triumphant couple stranded at the gate, dreams dissolving into confusion. But beneath the strategic movements, something else stirred. A tremor of doubt. For the first time since last night, her composure cracked. Not visibly, not to anyone else, but inside. What if he fought harder than she expected? What if the courts twisted his narrative, painted her preparation as cold calculation? Would her foresight be enough? She pressed her palms against the desk, grounding herself. Fear was familiar. It had followed her through every uncertain month of her marriage, whispering that maybe she wasn't enough, that maybe Mark's contempt was deserved. But now, fear served a different role. It was no longer an anchor, it was fuel. Her inbox pinned, a message from her lawyer. Emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. We're in a strong position. Relief washed through her like light through glass. Still, her phone vibrated again, this time with a call. The name flashing across the screen made her stomach tighten. Barbara. Mark's mother. She answered. The line crackling. Claire, dear? Barbara began, her voice tight with judgment. Mark told us everything. How controlling you've been. How you drove him away. Why are you making trouble with his travel plans? The Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was familial. She glanced at the growing stack of evidence beside her, her fortress of truth. Barbara, she said evenly, would you like me to read you his texts? The one where he laughed after draining our account? Or the one where he called me old? Silence. Then a faltering. Well, perhaps he didn't mention that part. The fracture was complete. Mark wasn't just losing a marriage. He was unraveling the illusion that had kept his family on his side. Claire ended the call gently, her hands steady once more. For the first time, she saw not just defense in her preparation but victory on the horizon. Mark thought he was orchestrating an escape. In truth, he was walking straight into the trap he'd built for himself. And Claire, quiet, careful Claire, was ready to let it spring shut by Sunday. The silence in the house felt heavier than any storm. Claire moved through its hallways like a soldier before battle, gathering papers, highlighting records, stacking folders in neat rows across the dining table. Each document was a shield: tax filings, boutique registrations, property deeds, evidence layered like armor. But armor couldn't muffle the ache. In quiet moments, when the printer stopped humming and the phone stopped buzzing, she felt the sting in her chest. Not for Mark. The man he had become was a stranger. But for the 12 years of herself she had poured into him, only to watch him toss it aside for a fleeting thrill. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. The judge will see right through you. You think you're clever, but you're just bitter. Melissa is everything you're not: young, exciting. I'll have half of that shop by the time this is over. Claire's breath caught, not because the words hurt, but because of their arrogance. He still didn't see her. Not her foresight, not her strength. Not the woman who had been documenting his every misstep. To him, she was still the background character in his story. She typed a reply, fingers hovering over the screen. Then she deleted it. Silence was sharper. Silence was strategy. The hours blurred, the house filled with the echo of her preparations. By late evening, the only sound was the low hum of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She poured herself a glass of wine. The special occasion. Bottle she had saved for years. Tonight wasn't victory yet, but it was something close. A pause before the strike. The phone rang again. This time she answered. Claire. It was Amanda, Mark's sister. Her voice was tentative, almost embarrassed. I shouldn't be calling, but he's unraveling. He's been ranting to everyone about how you ruined his trip. He even said you hacked his card. People are laughing, Claire. He's making a fool of himself. Claire leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine slowly. He doesn't need my help for that. Amanda hesitated, then whispered. I'm sorry I believed him, about you. About everything. Hey, he's not who we thought he was. Claire closed her eyes. For a moment, her chest tightened with the weight of vindication. Not triumph, not yet, but the first cracks in the wall of lies he'd built around himself. After the call, the house felt quieter than before. Claire carried her glass to the window, staring at the moonlight pooling across the lawn. She wondered if Mark was staring at the same sky, furious and restless in some cheap motel near the airport. For the first time in days, she let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the grief, the small voice whispering, what if this backfires? She pressed her forehead to the cool glass. Her body trembled, just for a moment. Vulnerability slipped through the cracks of her armor. Then the clock struck midnight. She straightened, lifted her chin. Vulnerability was part of the war, but not defeat. Tomorrow, she would walk into the courthouse. Tomorrow, the story Mark thought he had written would be torn apart, line by line. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, the kind of air heavy with judgment. Claire's heels echoed across the marble floor, each step deliberate. Measured. In her hands, the leather briefcase felt less like a bag and more like a weapon. The quiet kind that didn't fire bullets but cut clean with truth. Mark was already there. He leaned against the wall outside the courtroom. His blazer too tight, his smirk rehearsed. Melissa perched nearby, scrolling her phone, her youth stark under the harsh fluorescent lights. She didn't look triumphant, she looked bored. Claire, Mark said, straightening. His tone was syrupy, mocking. You look tired. This whole thing doesn't have to be ugly. Just hand over what's fair, and we'll walk away civilized. Claire's gaze didn't waver. Fair, she repeated softly. As if tasting the word, she didn't add more. The courtroom doors opened, and the bailiff called them in. Inside, time slowed. The room buzzed with whispers, the shuffle of papers, the scrape of chairs. The judge presided from the bench. Eyes sharp, waiting. Mark's lawyer rose first, painting Claire as vindictive, calculated, cold. My client, he intimated, admits to mistakes. But Mrs. Harrison's behavior, meticulously separating finances, anticipating this divorce, shows intent to punish, not to share. Claire's lawyer stood calmly, her voice like flint striking steel. What my client shows, she countered, is foresight, prudence. Survival. She held up the thick binder of evidence, receipts, screenshots, statements. One by one, she laid them out like cards in a game Mark thought he was winning. The text messages glowed on the projection screen. Mark's laughter after draining the joint account. His casual cruelty about Claire's age. His boastful admission of booking flights with the shared card. Each message was a blade, and with every cut, the room's air grew heavier. Mark shifted in his chair, his smirk dissolving. Melissa leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Not at Claire, but at him. Finally, the judge turned to Mark. Mr. Harrison. His voice carried through the chamber, deliberate and unflinching. Do you deny these are your words? Mark stammered. Well, they were jokes. Heat of the moment. Financial fraud. The judge interrupted. Is not a joke, nor is attempting to claim property that documentation proves is not yours. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Claire felt the weight lift. Not in triumph, not in cruelty, but in release. Years of gaslighting, of being diminished, of swallowing her truth, it all cracked apart in that one moment. She hadn't just survived his betrayal, she had dismantled it. The gavel struck. The court rules in favor of Mrs. Harrison. All shared assets frozen. Separate property confirmed. Mr. Harrison is ordered to repay funds removed within 24 hours. Mark's face drained of color. Melissa stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. "You didn't tell me about this," she hissed. "You said it was simple. You said." But her words trailed off as she walked out, her heels sharp against the floor. She didn't look back. Claire rose. For the first time in months, she stood taller than the weight of her past. Not victorious, not vengeful, simply free. As she walked out, Mark called after her, voice cracking with desperation. "You've destroyed me, Claire." She paused at the doorway, turning just enough for him to see her profile. "No," she said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just stopped you from destroying me too." And then she left, the courthouse doors swinging closed behind her like a final chapter sealing shut. 6 months later. The boutique smelled of new leather and possibility. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, the racks heavy with a new season's designs. Customers spilled through the door in a steady stream, their chatter weaving into the hum of commerce. Claire moved among them with quiet confidence, every gesture rooted in the knowledge that she had built this world with her own hands. The expansion had been fast. Faster than she ever dreamed, but not reckless. The little shop Mark had once sneered at now had 2 locations and an online store. Orders pinged her phone throughout the day, steady reminders that she had turned betrayal into momentum, cruelty into growth. Sometimes, though, the past still whispered. A careless laugh that reminded her of Mark's, the faint scent of his old cologne on a stranger in a crowd. It no longer cut, but it lingered a bruise instead of a wound. Healing, but never forgotten. She kept one reminder deliberately, the framed screenshot of his text message. "At least you've got your little shop to keep you busy." Below it, on a narrow shelf, sat her latest award for entrepreneurial excellence. The irony was no longer bitter. It was sweet, a private joke she shared only with herself. Through mutual acquaintances, she heard fragments of Mark decline. A failed promotion who left when the money ran out. A return to his mother's house, his old bedroom now a cage instead of a refuge. Each story carried its own justice, but Claire didn't gloat. His downfall was not her victory. Her victory was standing here thriving untouched. One evening, as twilight bled gold across the shop windows, Melissa stepped inside. She looked different. Older, not in years but in the wary way truth marks the skin. She hesitated at the threshold before approaching Claire. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Melissa murmured. "I believed everything he told me. That you were cold, controlling, that you didn't care about him. But he used me the same way. And when it crumbled I understood." The Claire studied her for a long moment. Then nodded. "He never wanted love. He wanted an escape. There's a difference." Melissa's eyes was something between shame and relief. She left soon after, and Claire returned to her work, the encounter already fading into memory. As closing time neared, Claire stood at the boutique's window, watching the city move outside. Couples walking, lights flickering alive. Life rushing forward. She caught her own reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had once trembled at a cruel text message. This woman carried fire in her eyes, strength in her spine. Her phone buzzed again, another order confirmation. She smiled faintly, flipping the sign to closed. Mark had believed he was writing her ending when he typed those careless words. But endings belong to the unprepared. Claire had written her own story instead, one of resilience, of quiet power, of becoming more than he ever imagined. She turned away from the glass, the boutique lights dimming behind her, and whispered to the empty room as though sealing the truth into its walls. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming untouchable. And with that, she stepped into the night, the future wide open before her.